The reason why 41% of people have more anxiety and stress is because they're controlling us more. That's what people are not equating to, is the less freedom you have and the less control of your own personal life that you have, that leads to anxiety and stress. And when people feel out of control, they feel anxiety and stress. But that's what they're doing, is trying to control you and everything you do. And in fact, the food that you eat and vaccines that you take and whatever it is. That's where all the stress is coming from. And unfortunately, too many people are voting themselves into stress. They're voting it because they keep electing these people that take control of their lives. So they're actually voting stress on you. So they won't connect the dots, but you can connect the dots, obviously. And that goes back to what we're talking about. We're back in Genesis 38, and we're looking at the situation between Judah and Tamar, and him railroading her, and lying to her, promising her things, and this is his daughter-in-law. And what it really represents is Judah is the head of his family, which you could see that as a head of a company, head of a, he's the authoritarian structure in his family. And poor Tamar is this powerless individual that has really no say in the matter of what's going on here. And what's happened is, through a series of deaths of his sons, he keeps promising, okay, I'll make sure you have an heir. And there's a Levirate law in the ancient world to where if one of your sons died and he had no heir, then the next of kin had to produce an heir through the widow. And Tamar is that widow, and everybody that gets married to her, God kills. Because they're so evil and wicked. And so Judah keeps holding her back from getting an heir, not realize, well, he does, yeah, I guess I'd say he doesn't realize by her not being able to produce an heir, the line of the Messiah is not going to continue. And Tamar is the heroine of the story, and she actually buys into the Abrahamic covenant, and she understands what God is doing, and she's a Gentile, but she's more on board than Judah, and she wants to preserve the line of the Messiah and wants to preserve the line of Israel. And so she's trying to do everything she can, but the system won't allow her. The system's bent against her. And the head of the system is Judah, and he's kind of out of his mind at this point in time. And he's not thinking straight, and he represents all of us under bad authority. He represents bad authority, and then we represent Tamar under that bad authority. And what do? Right? That's the idea here. And so she's going to resist it, and not everything she does is copacetic, but she does do the main thing by resisting it, and we're going to take what she does good and apply it to ourselves, into our system. Because we're under a totalitarian regime as we speak. We're losing freedoms like there's no tomorrow. And we just watched a second assassination attempt last Sunday happen to a running candidate for office. And what we're thinking to ourselves, what world are we in, man? Well, I can tell you this. The globalists do not want Donald Trump getting in there. He threw a monkey wrench in their plans before, and they're not about to let him do it again. And they have been planning on this. And so it doesn't shock me there's been 2 assassination attempts, and I don't put it out of the realm of possibility that there's going to be another one. Because look, there's a lot at stake for the globalists, and I'll talk about that in just a bit. But let's talk about this shooter. They want to pretend that this guy is not part of the deep state, that he is some lone wolf crazy that decided, hey, there's Trump on the golf course, I'm going to take a shot at him. That's not what happened. This guy staked out the location for 12 hours. He was there from 2 in the morning until Trump played golf. And oh, by the way, the Secret Service is lying to you. The guy got caught in a lie. He says, this was kind of a last-minute decision on Trump to play golf. No, it wasn't, because how did the shooter know to be there 12 hours before? He wouldn't have been there staked out had he not somebody from the inside tell him he's going to play golf on Sunday afternoon. The Secret Service is lying to you. The FBI is lying to you. They're keeping closed mouth. DeSantis can't even get the FBI to cooperate with him in Florida. So the point is, we got a totalitarian regime, a deep state running things, and I don't like that. I don't like, as an American citizen, I didn't vote these creeps in the office. Who are these people controlling things and trying to take out political candidates? And then we use an asset like this guy. This guy's a total asset. And what do I mean? Well, look, he's been charged with 100 criminal counts and never served any jail time. How does anybody get charged 100 times and not serve any jail time? How does he get charged with a federal offense of having a weapon of mass destruction, a machine gun? Dude, you're looking at 15 to 20 years federally with that. He served no time. He's got $300 to his name, and yet he lives in an $800,000 bungalow in Hawaii. He's a so-called roofer, but yet he's in Afghanistan and Iran and Pakistan recruiting people to serve in the war in Ukraine. He claims to have recruited over 6,000 people, and this guy doesn't come on the FBI or CIA's radar? I'm sorry. I'm not stupid, and neither are you. This is not some lone wolf. These are just two crazy kids. This is two attempts on the president's life, and the Secret Service let it happen. That's all you can think. Because the Matthew guy on the roof, dude, that was blown. That's totally blown. This one, you didn't even search the perimeter, and they knew that area of the golf course is open. They knew that. You didn't guard that area? You knew you were going to be there? I'm sorry. There's something else going on here. Okay, but my point is it's a deep state. Now, at the same time, this weekend, the globalists who are trying to take over the entire planet are planning the global government for us. Now, it used to be a conspiracy theory to say whether they're going to do a global government. Oh, that's conspiracy. They're out in the open. They're going to do it, whether you like it or not. And I didn't vote on this. So in New York this weekend, the UN is meeting there to create a global government. And out of 193 countries are there, 1,000 delegates, and they're going to create one world government. Now, here's the three aspects that they're focusing in on this weekend. And this is important for you to understand, because depending on this election will determine the path we take, whether we go global or we push back. Because America is the only one that's pushing back on the globalism. No other country is. They're all going with this. And the Biden administration, by the way, they're for it. They're for it. So what's the pact for the future? The pact for the future is a lot of things, and I read through it this weekend, and it's like reading an instruction manual in a foreign language, but it's all through this social justice terminology and wokeism, all this other junk that's in there. But let me give you the basis of it. The Pact for the Future means that the Secretary General of the UN will get emergency powers in any kind of shock or crisis that occurs globally, whether that's a financial shock, a pandemic shock, a war, or whatever, that they have the right to give themselves emergency powers through their agreed upon protocols, and the Secretary General then will make a decision on how to handle the crisis, and the other countries have to submit to it. Okay? And then he, with his emergency powers, can extend it as long as he needs to do. He can just keep extending and extending and extending. So basically, you have the beast system with one guy on the top calling the shots for the entire globe. Okay? That's the pact for the future. And this is being voted on. The second thing is declaration for future generations. What this is the UN's attempt to grab all the young people around the world and bring them into the UN to indoctrinate them. Because as you have seen in any revolution, whether it's Nazism or communist revolution, or what you're seeing in the public schools today, the way to get a generation is to go after the young people in formative ages and brainwash them to where when they're starting to vote and do everything, then you have little Nazi youths running around. And that's what the UN is trying to do. They say in their document, we want the young people to come in be part of the decision-making process. I'm sorry, I don't consult young people in their teens for any decision-making process I make. So why would the UN say, we want to bring all these teenagers into the UN and let them weigh in on decision making? No, it's really called indoctrination is what it's called. Global Digital Compact, the third element. This is the thing where they want to seize control of the internet, seize control of AI, and then run the AI through the SDG, woke, progressive values through the AI. And that's what they're voting for. And 193 countries are voting and saying, we're going forward with this. And then they use the word supercharge. We need to supercharge this because we only got 5 or 6 years left until 2030. And so we got to really put this in gear. And guess what? Guess who's been the main objector to this? The United States. And yet now, you lose this election, pop the clutch, we're going global. Okay, that's what will happen. This is what they're deciding right this weekend. It's not like 30 years from now. It's now. It's happening. So we're in the same predicament as Tamar because I don't have a lot of control over the UN and neither do you. Okay, so then what can I do? Well, let's see what Tamar does. Let's do a refresher from last week and then we'll get to where we left off. It came to pass that at the time that Judah departed from his brothers and visited a certain Adulamite whose name was Hira. And Judah saw there a daughter of a certain Canaanite whose name was Shua, and he married her and went into her. Again, this is review, but what is this? Judah is moving from the family base with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He's moving into Canaanite territory, and then becomes a friend or kind of an acquaintance with Hira, this other Canaanite. And then he hangs out so much with Canaanites, he spots a Canaanite that he'd like to marry, and so he marries this Canaanite woman. And what it's illustrating to us is this is how all corporations, authority structures, this is what happens when they corrupt internally. They move away from godly values, biblical values, Judeo-Christian ethics, and they move to Canaanitism or paganism. And that's really what goes on in any structure. Look at the United States. Look what has happened to our government with the corruption involved in it. It's definitely pagan. It's definitely Canaanite. It's moved away from God's ways. Like, for instance, God's way is tell the truth. They lie as easy as it is to breathe. Okay? You can't deal with people that are constantly lying, which they do all the time. And the media lies, right? So it's a drift, and that's what's happened in Judah's life. He's drifted to the Canaanites. So he's become a friend, met a guy at a bar that he's friends with, the Canaanite guy, Hira. And Hira says, hey, over on the other end of the bar is this Canaanite woman. I think you ought to hook up with her. And he hooks up with a Canaanite woman. And you can imagine Judah is a Yahwehist, and he's going to marry a Canaanite woman. So let me ask you this. So if that scenario, you have the believer marrying an unbeliever, who do you think wins in that marriage? The unbeliever. That's who wins. Bad company corrupts good character. So then they get married, and so what should I expect out of their kids? Should I expect Yahweh worshipers or should I expect pagans? Well, it's real clear. So she conceived and bore a son, and he called his name She conceived again and bore a son, and she called his name Onan. And she conceived yet again and bore a son and called his name Shelah. He was at Chezib when she bore him. Okay, did you notice that? The first kid, Judah names. Second kid, she names. Third kid, she names. So what's happened? A shift has changed in the household. In the Hebrew context, those who name have authority. So all of a sudden, Judah lost his authority by the second kid coming around because she's naming the kid and she names the third kid, which means the house went upside down, which means that the Adam and Eve syndrome took hold, and all of a sudden the woman's in charge and he's not. He's sitting back there like Casper Milquetoast on his hands and letting her rule the roost. That's what's happening, okay? And we talked about this. So what should we expect out of those kids that she's raising, not him? He's taking a back seat on this. I wonder how the kids will come out. Well, then Judah took a wife for his firstborn, and her name was Tamar. So enter Tamar. So she's a Canaanite. She's a Gentile outside of the family. But what you're going to see with Tamar is she's the heroine of the story, even though she's a Canaanite Gentile. She cares more about the line of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob than Judah does. She cares more about the kings that are promised to come from the line of Abraham, and that king being Jesus. Okay, so she cares more about that. She's a pagan Gentile, but she becomes a Yahwehist. And yet Judah, he could care less. Okay, so, but Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord killed him. So he's dead. So the Lord killed him because he's that wicked. Well, you have a Canaanite mom. She's large and in charge. She produces a Canaanite kid. Well, out, gone, you're done. He's crazy. And look, to be killed by God, you got to be like psychopathic. You got to be like the point of no return for God to hit a bolt of lightning out of the sky and kill you. You got to be like the point of no return, okay? You're a bad dude. So poor Tamar's had to deal with this guy. Now he's gone. So what ends up happening in their culture is she doesn't have an heir. So in order to give the dead son an heir, there's a levirate law that allows the next of kin to impregnate her so she can have an heir, okay? And this is really a financial thing about inheritance. It's not a real sexual thing. It's a financial thing. And it was practiced in that day, and it's also practiced in Mosaic law, by the way. God allowed it to happen. So it was a big deal, especially with inheritance and land. Okay, so what happens? Go into your brother's wife and marry her and raise up an heir to your brother. But Onan, of course, he's another little Canaanite, pagan, just like his little mom. Onan knew that her heir would not be his, so he doesn't want to split the inheritance. And it came to pass that when he went into his brother's wife, that he emitted on the ground. So he commits coitus interruptus. And the Hebrew says he kept doing it over and over again, lest he should give an heir to his brother. And the thing which he did displeased the Lord, and therefore he killed him also. Okay, well, there you go. Showing you that the Lord takes this seriously about providing a line, okay? And in this case, the Lord's really serious because the line ends up being the line of the Messiah, okay? The line ends up being the line of Israel, right? And where King David's going to come through, and all of them, Moses and everybody's going to come through. So this is critical that there is a descendant for Judah, because Judah will be eventually predicted to be the leader of Israel. Right now he can't be because he's crazy. He will learn from all of this, but one day Judah will be the leader, and then out of his tribe will come the scepter. Out of his tribe will come the star. And that would be obviously the Messiah. So everything's on the line here. So God kills him. Okay. So then Judah said to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, remain a widow in your father's house till my son Shelah is grown. So, and again, next of kin, which is would be able to marry her and have a child. Well, this is the youngest boy of Judah, and he's not of age to marry. So he says, remain in your father's house till my son Shelah is grown. But he's lying. He's promising something he doesn't want to deliver. For he said, lest he also die like his brothers. And like we talked about last week, Judah has no introspection whatsoever on himself. He thinks that Tamar is like a black widow, like a pagan superstition that everybody she marries, she kills, right? It's stupid. He won't have any introspection and say, I wonder why God is killing my kids. Well, maybe that crazy Canaanite woman you married is causing them to be so corrupted that God has to kill them because she's producing psychopaths. Maybe that should be the thought, you know. But people like Judah sometimes don't have any introspection. They won't look down deep because then they have to blame themselves, and he's not going to do that at this point in his life. And Tamar went and dwelt in her father's house. And you think, what is the big deal there? It's a big deal. Tamar goes and dwells in Judah's house, his family, his tribe. Judah is the head of that tribe. He is the authority. And now you have a woman who is powerless in this environment to do anything about the regime that she's in. And in the regime she's in, Judah is lying to her and not going to give her an heir. But this is the weird thing, Judah is preserving his younger son But in doing so, he's preventing the line of the Messiah from coming. He's actually unknowingly basically being used as a useful idiot by Satan to stop the line of the Messiah. So the hero in the story is Tamar Tamar keeps jumping in and saying, wait a second, you can't do this. It's more than just me having an error, it's you having an error, Judah. Okay, so now it brings us up to this point in the story. So now in the process of time, the daughter of Shua, Judah's wife, died, and Judah was comforted. Well, what is the point here? Well, let's put it this way. It's a necessary ending. There are times in our lives, and you probably have realized it, that things come to an end, and you're like, thank God that's over. Okay? Done. Don't want to repeat it. Don't want to go back. I'm so glad that's over. Huge mistake or whatever it was, but it typically revolves around some I hate to say it, person, and the Lord takes him home or something like that. I don't know. But a season ends, and you're not wishing that anyone dies, but you're glad that the season's over. Okay. And I'm trying to put it as nicely as I possibly can. I don't wish anyone to die, but that's what happens. I'm just saying. And why is this so critical? Because she has been the problem in the family up until this point. She has been the major producer of these Canaanite kids that God has to kill. Okay? And she's been the problem that's taken over Judah's life. And so now that she's gone, Judah has a little bit of clarity in his head a little bit. And now God starts working on Judah. It seems to be that this was the tipping point to get rid of her so that God can now start getting Judah's head screwed on straight. Because as long as she was with him, he couldn't think straight. And he's still not going to think straight for a while, but you're going to see a progression in Judah as he's coming along getting this. And God's going to teach him these lessons through Talonic justice. But again, let's talk about necessary endings as a principle. In life, there needs to be necessary endings with things. Maybe bad relationships or things in our life that are not healthy, and you're like, this has got to end. We just can't keep rolling like this, right? And Judah can't just keep rolling like this. If his wife didn't die, at some point, Judah would have had to take control of his family. It's unfortunate that his wife had to die for him to take control of things, but, he should have taken control, but he didn't. All right, let's talk about Israel as an example. So you probably heard this week, these pagers go off in these guys' pockets, and these walkie-talkies go off, and you're thinking, what's that about? Well, we know what it's about. It's what happened with Hezbollah. So Nasrallah comes out and says, hey, Hezbollah terrorists, Israel's tracking us on our phones, and they're pinpointing accuracy and going to take you out. So get rid of your cell phones, and we're going to distribute you guys pagers and walkie-talkies, like a pager from 1985, right? And that way Israel can't track you, whatever. Well, apparently Israel's intelligence got a hold of the pagers and put explosives in the pagers and in the walkie-talkies, okay? And detonated them this week. And here's what you have to understand. The only ones that had pagers and walkie-talkies are Hezbollah operatives, terrorists, not civilians. And what it shows you is how pinpoint accurate Israel is in taking out the people they need to take out, okay? And it didn't kill a lot of people, but that's not what it was supposed to be. Actually, it was supposed to be something different. But I'll explain that in just a bit. So here's the walkie-talkies that blew up, and again, these are all happening to Hezbollah operatives. So I'll show you these videos of how they went off. These are not civilians. Please understand, these are not Lebanese civilians. These are Hezbollah terrorists, and they're in the market and stuff. So watch this guy as his pager goes off. Here's another one, the guy in the yellow. Keep your eye on him. Again, this is not a civilian. It's a Hezbollah operative. His pager will go off because someone in Hezbollah is contacting him. Here's outside rally. Again, these are Hezbollah. These are not civilians. So here's some of the damage that was done. Lit some apartments on fire, trucks on fire. Okay, so what happened? Well, here's what went on. Israel was going to attack the north. And what came out of this was one of the guys in Hezbollah, a member of Hezbollah, became suspicious of what was in the pager. They opened it up. They found the explosive. And Israel's intelligence figured that out, and they said, okay, our cover's blown, what are we going to do? So they decided to just ignite all the pagers and then the next day ignite the walkie-talkies because the cover was blown. They didn't want the cover to be blown. So what was Israel planning? Israel was planning an assault on Hezbollah in the north. That's what came out of this. And so they backed off because the cover was blown. So what they were planning to do with the pagers and the explosives was that would be the first wave of attack, and then they would go in there. So cause confusion, because a lot of these pagers and walkie-talkies didn't kill anybody. They killed a couple dozen, that was it. But it was to inflict chaos. It was to inflict damage on Hezbollah operatives, and then Israel goes in there and takes them. So you just almost watched a full-scale invasion of the north by Israel, which makes sense because we've been talking about this, and we've been talking to some of our IDF contacts that the IDF has moved all the way to the north. They've isolated Hamas over there and still dealing with Hamas, but they've moved to the north. Our guys we've talked to moved to the north. Their troops have moved to the north and expecting a full-scale war. And that's what one of our guys said. It's like, we're expecting to attack Hezbollah eventually, and then Iran. And because Israel can't live with the situation there. I mean, look at this, man. This is like if you sent your kids to school in Nazareth, which I don't advise living in Nazareth, by the way. It's pretty bad there. But if your kids go to school, this is the bombs they find, near the school. This is coming from Hezbollah that's fired as rockets into the north. This is why 85, maybe 90,000, maybe up to 100 possibly Israelis live in hotels right now. It's just intolerable. And so if you live in the north and this is a village in the north, this is why you can't live there. So, and this is a constant barrage of rock. This happened yesterday, by the way, and so you can see Iron Dome intercepting them. The missiles coming out of Hezbollah being fired and Iron Dome taking them out. And I think this is in Haifa. But how would you like to live every day like that? Just constantly hearing bombs go off, and Iron Dome's taking care of it, but then these mortars and everything are falling to the ground, and it's like I'm walking around with PTSD constantly over there. Here's more of Iron Dome and taking out some of these things. And what if you live there like that? I mean, it's just insane. So obviously, Iron Dome is taking out a lot of those rockets, but understand that Hezbollah has 150,000 rockets they can fire in and overwhelm Iron Dome, or even David's sling. And so my point is, necessary endings. The election in America is factoring into Israel's decision. So what we understand is Israel was going to do a full-scale invasion, okay? And they got to get Hezbollah out of them. And they did it before the election. And we had talked about this with some of our insiders in Israel. When do you think this is going to happen? And they were telling us before the election, because they don't trust what will happen in our election. They have seen 2 assassination attempts. They see that the polls continue to show Harris neck and neck with Trump, and they do not expect a good thing happening in our elections, obviously. And they've seen past elections. And so they're not very optimistic. And so the idea is, well, we have a window now. You better do it now, because if the Kamala Harris administration gets in there, they're going to thwart what Israel's trying to do in the north, because they do not want a regional war with Iran. Because you attack Hezbollah, that means you bring in Iran. Then you bring in Iran, you bring in Russia. And all of a sudden, you have the whole thing blowing up, right? And they don't want that. But Israel's got to do this. They have to deal with Hezbollah. So again, it's a necessary ending, but the necessary ending is a tripwire for a bunch of dominoes to fall in place, prophetically speaking. So we're going to keep our eyes on this. By the way, if you want to know how precise Israel is in targeting terrorists, here's an example. Here's this dude, Ibrahim Akil, $7 million ransom for him, or a warrant out for his arrest. Israel finds him. This is what Israel does to you. Okay. That's how precise Israel is. They don't mess around. They can target the individual, and they're the most moral army on the planet. Okay, they don't target civilians. Like those pagers, that targeted only Hezbollah. Okay? And then at the same time, the UN General Assembly demands Israel to pull out of Jerusalem, Judea and Samaria, and then the Gaza. And it's like, you're crazy. Yeah, they are. But if the United States doesn't push back anymore, then Israel will not have an ally with the United States. That's the point. The only thing that's keeping these crazies at the UN in place is the United States. And I wonder how that's going to go after the election. And he went up to the sheep shearers at Timnah, he and his friend Hira, the Adulamite. Now that's interesting. Look what Moses has done. This guy Hira, who's a Canaanite, has now turned from an acquaintance to a friend. Degradation. Okay, so now he's saying, you know what? Your wife's dead. You know what? Let's go to the Kern County Fair and get drunk. That's really what he's saying. Let's go, because they're doing the sheep shearing stuff, and that was a big festive time. Guys would get drunk. It was just a party time. So to put it in our modern day vernacular, hey, let's forget you have any problems and let's go party. That's what he's saying. What else would I expect from a Canaanite? Hey, let's go pray to Yahweh? I don't think so. Hey, let's forget your troubles and let's check out and zone out and go party. That's what he's saying. Okay? So there's a principle here. When you're under this totalitarian regime that we're under now, and things are not looking very well, and they're taking more freedoms away from us, you can't bury the problem. You can't ignore the problem like so many Christians are doing. They're sticking their head in the sand, pretending that it's not happening, Brandon. Brandon, you're just crazy. This is not, the UN's not meeting this weekend, deciding what they're going to do about global governance. That right there is costing us. And because when you ignore what's going on in the world and instead turn to worldly distractions, that's the problem. That's what this Canaanite's telling Judah to do. Ignore the problems, man. Let's just go party. Let's forget about our troubles. Well, even if you don't go and party, it's the same concept. You can't ignore what's happening around you. You can't ignore what's happening in your family. You can't ignore what's happening in your community. You can't ignore what's happening in Bakersfield or the United States or the West. And you just keep going bigger and bigger and bigger. But too many people are ignoring it. And they're distracting themselves saying, it's not happening, it's not happening, it's not happening, it's not happening. Okay? That's the wrong mentality. That's the mentality that says, okay, well, yeah, it's $20 to go to Chipotle, and now they're putting AI, but I'm going to ignore that. I'm going to ignore that. And that's what we start doing with our problems. We think, well, we'll handle the regime that we're in by, let's go get drunk. Let's go get high. Let's go have sex. Let's escape. And that doesn't solve the problem. Because even if he comes back from the sheep shearing party, guess what? Judah still has the problem. It's still in front of him. So you can escape all you want, but what God is saying is confront it. Don't ignore it. Don't push it under the carpet. Deal with it. You dealing with it actually helps you in your stress and anxiety levels. And it was told to Tamar, saying, look, your father-in-law is going up to Timnah to shear the sheep. He's going to the party, going to the Kern County Fair to have a few. Okay? So she took off her widow's garments, covered herself with a veil, and wrapped herself, and sat in an open place, which was on the way to Timnah. For she saw that Shelah was grown, and she was not given to him as a wife. Okay, what does an individual do who is powerless? Judah's not making good on his promise, and there needs to be an heir to continue all of this. Well, I don't recommend what she did, okay? But I do recommend the faith risk that she took. And that's what Moses is trying to highlight. She took a risk because she's the kind of person, this is why she's a heroine, says, look, man, something's got to be done about this. We can't just sit on the spiritual couch and say, let go and let God. I've got to do something. I got to be responsible in this. And she chose something that was wrong, but it came from the motivation of at least she's trying to do something, if that makes sense. It may not be perfect, and that's sometimes what the biblical characters do. They have good intentions, but a lot of times they'll mess things up on the way, and it gets muddied up. But what Moses is trying to do, he will not condemn her for this. She's trying to say, look, man, I care more about the line than you do, Judah, and I'm going to do something about it. I'm not going to let this happen. So she takes this in her hands. And the idea of taking a veil and wrapping herself means that she's going to seduce him, okay? But let me show you the pattern of Talonic justice here. It's a Hebrew pattern. And the way God has created the environment in which we live, the reality in which we live, is He has infused laws in our reality. Now, whether you like those laws or not is not relevant. They exist, and you have to come to terms with it. And the way He has structured reality is Talonic justice, which means what you dish out, you get back. And that's pretty scary, because you're going to see in this text a lot of that justice happening to Judah, and it's meant to wake him up. Okay? He's getting a taste of what he dished out, and this is what's going to reform his mind. Okay? So let me give you an example. So when Jacob dresses up like Esau, you remember that, and fools his father, Isaac, he uses a covering of what hair? Goat hair. His mom makes goat stew to deceive Isaac, okay? So Jacob is deceiving his own father with a goat and using the goat as a cover. So there's a piece of cloth involved in this, okay? Let's move down the line to Talonic justice. Judah tricks Jacob by using Joseph's coat, dips it in whose blood? A goat's blood, to fool Jacob. So the goat's involved and a veil's involved. Now Tamar is going to fool Judah, and you're going to watch a goat enter the story, and she's going to do it with a veil. You can't write that on your own. That's supernatural. And what's happening is Talonic justice is happening, and God's trying to get these people's attention saying, hey man, You fooled your father. Let these people, they're going to fool you in the same way. You fooled them with a goat, let me use a goat. You fooled them with a veil, I'm going to use a veil. And he's going to do it to Judah. That's Talonic justice. But again, the issue then for us is, at some point in your life, you're going to have to take a faith risk. And I don't know what that's going to mean for you or me, but maybe it's in the realm of free speech, okay? Because I think that's going to be the first thing they kill here in the United States, which they're killing all over the place. And at some point, you're going to have to take a risk in faith, like Tamar, to do the right thing, okay? Maybe that's at your job. Maybe that's at your family. Maybe that's wherever. But you're going to have to take a faith risk. You have to get off the spiritual couch and do something. It's not going to happen if you and I don't get up. There's too many Christians sitting this one out. And so there's, too bad. Let me go get drunk so I can just take my mind off a totalitarian regime being put in place. Okay, at some point you're going to have to take a risk. I don't know when that's going to come, but maybe it's coming soon, I think. Because here's what's happening. Let me give you an example of what's happening, what's coming our way. And again, the risk you're going to have to take, I think, is primarily going to be talking about the truth. Okay? Here's what just leaked out. America First Legal, I read all the slides, by the way. So here's what the Biden administration just did on August 10th, 2021. Okay? The White House met with the Counter-Disinformation Unit from the UK. The Counter-Disinformation Unit of the UK is the most progressive leftist organization that tries to quell and censor free speech in the UK. This is why people in the UK are getting arrested for causing people anxiety by the social media posts that they have. Okay? They call it, oh, you're causing anxiety. You're causing the Muslims to be mad. Oh, you're causing the LGBT to be mad. Oh, you're causing this person. We're going to put you in jail. And this group is behind all of that. Censoring, monitoring, all that junk. So guess who the Biden administration invited into? Hey, why don't you brief us and tell us how you're doing it in the UK? And by the way, I'll call in all of our buddies. So guess who went to this meeting? High-level staff at the White House, NSC, the Office Director of National Intelligence, CIA, FBI, DOD, DHS, Human Health Services, U.S. Agencies for International Development, global media, and high-ranking officers in the Army, Navy, and Air Force. They were all taught this: how to deceive the American public and censor their speech according to how the UK does it there in Britain. Guys, this is not a theory anymore. They do not want you having free speech anymore. They want to quell it. That's why the UN wants to control the internet and AI, because then they can control the algorithm. And they can censor you. And look what crazy Pharaoh Newsom has done. He put out some type of law and some type of legislation. He signed it on Tuesday, making it illegal with malice not only to distribute advertisement or other election communication containing materially deceptive content 120 days before an election and 60 days after. So what do you mean by that? Well, like for instance, this is a meme that was created by AI. It's Gavin Newsom in some royal gown, That's illegal. So I can't say to the AI, generate me a picture of Kamala holding two cats over a barbecue. Okay? I can't do that. That would be illegal under Mr. Dictator here in California. Well, by the way, that doesn't stand because we have free speech, but it's coming to the point where you won't be able to do that, really. And so, who do these people think they are? But again, the reason they do this is because they know they won't get a pushback. That's why they do it. And so, talking about risk, the Hoke family, I mean, FBI, thank God they're suing the FBI. They need to sue the FBI. But the FBI raided this guy for praying in front of an abortion clinic. Hey, man, what's wrong with the FBI? What's wrong with the Secret Service? What's wrong with the CIA? I thought they were supposed to help us. Apparently not. When Judas saw her, he thought she was a harlot. Well, into my thing, you would say, well, she's a harlot, I need to stay away. Oh, no, not him. Because she had covered her face. Then he turned by her by the way and said, hey, please let me come into you. He's basically saying, hey, I want to proposition you for sex. What? Judah, did you forget all your morals under the Yahwehistic system? Did you forget that? Apparently so, because he just married a Canaanite wife. Now she's dead. He's moved on. He's got to move on with his life. So what does he do? Hook up with a harlot. Thank you. For he did not know that she was his daughter-in-law. Yeah, I bet he didn't. She's veiled. That's why he's being deceived by her. Oh, gotcha. Yeah, Talonic justice. So she said, what will you give me that you may come into me? And he said, I will send you, enter what? The young goat. Talonic justice. A goat has been used 3 times. Have you noticed that? I want a goat from you, which would be a very expensive thing at that time. And of course, because he's going to the Kern County Fair to party, he didn't bring a goat with him. So he says, well, what will you give me instead, me a pledge that you'll send the goat eventually, because he didn't have it with him. Then he said, what pledge shall I give you? Come, name it. Well, that was stupid for him to say that. So she said, I want your signet ring, your cord, and your staff that is in your hand. Then he gave them to her and went into her, and she conceived by him. Okay, so what's this about? Well, she's the girl that is powerless has now outsmarted the authority. She totally outsmarted him. This is ingenious of her to do this. Not to pretend she's a prostitute. Don't get me wrong there. That's wrong. What's ingenious is what she requested of him. What was ingenious is, I want your signet ring. You know what a signet ring represented? It represented your ID. Because your signet ring would be, you would wear it, or it would go around your neck in this cord. And that's how you would stamp your identification on clay or wax or whatever to say, no, it's me. This is my signet ring. It would be like your driver's license. This is your ID, right? Or your social security number. And she said, then I want the cord around your neck, too. That holds the signet ring. So he probably wore it and the cord around his neck. Well, the cord, typically, it could be made out of string or something like that. But sometimes, what commentators have said is the cord would be made out of gold or silver or some type of precious stone, not stone, but metal, okay, that went along with it, that he wore. So she says, I want your cord, too. And then she says, I want your staff. And you're like, what's the big deal with a stick? Oh, it's a stick. No. This is a shepherd's stick. And the shepherd's stick typically had your identification carved into it or some type of signet on the shepherd's staff that said, that's his shepherd's staff. And the shepherd's staff represents his employment. So 3 things. I got your identification, I have your property, and I have your employment. That's brilliant. You know what she just did? She hacked him. She hacked him. Totally got all of his information. And why was that so important? Because she knows what's going to happen. And so in order to avoid the governmental intrusion, in order to avoid any authoritarian regime, you better document everything you have. I remember, just as an example, my friend Phil Haney, before he was suicided, and Phil Haney used to come here, he would always say, if you ever find me suicided, I didn't do it. But when he worked for the Department of Homeland Security, he kept every email that was sent to him and in the discourse from what was told to him from all the way from Obama and Hillary Clinton. He had earmarked every documentation. So when he came out and said, this is what they're doing, he had the documentation to prove it. The point, though, is when you resist the regime, you better have your documents in place. You better make sure that you have protected yourself by having evidence in any regime that you ever get into. You better have evidence. okay? And you shouldn't have evidence that's going to incriminate you, okay? Because that's what they're looking for. So she gets the evidence to prove him wrong, and she's pretty smart about doing this. Phil, unfortunately, took a risk, and so is she. By getting that documentation, they ended up suiciding him. She's taking a risk too, but this is the only way when you're in a powerless situation of how you're going to thwart the powers that be. You better have documentation. That's it, okay? Then she gave them to her. Then he gave them to her and went into her, and she conceived by him. So she arose and went away and lay aside her veil and put on the garments of her widowhood. So she succeeded. She's pregnant now. Okay? She's got an offspring. And it's not just for her. It's for Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It's for Judah. So watch this. And Judah sent the young goat by the hand of his friend Adullamite. So now the friend of the Canaanite guy has become an accomplice now, not just a friend. He has moved into being an accomplice to receive his pledge from the woman's hand, but he did not find her. Then he asked the men of that place, saying, "Where is the harlot who was openly by the roadside?" And they said, "There was no harlot in this place." So we returned to Judah and said, "I cannot find her." Also, the men of this place said, "There was no harlot in this place." Then Judah said, "Well, let her take them for herself, lest we be shamed. For I sent this young goat, and you have not found her." Now, this is, again, showing more of Judah's character. Judah is more concerned with paying off a prostitute and making good on paying off the prostitute than he is for continuing the line of the Messiah. He's got problems, okay? He's got problems. And a lot of people in this kind of situation at the top, these elite people that are on top, they care more about eyes being seen and what they do rather than really what's going on behind the scenes. And that's really what it represents. Well, anyway, and it came to pass about 3 months after that Judah was told, saying, "Tamar, your daughter-in-law, has played the harlot. Furthermore, she is with child by harlotry." So Judah said to her, "Bring her out and let her be burned." Oh, Judah, I think you should take that back. So obviously, the deal was sealed. She's got pregnant. Now we're 3 months into it, and she's showing. And now the people around the tents in Judah's family saying, "Wait a second, she's supposed to be given to your son when he's of age, and now he's of age and yet hasn't been given, so she's betrothed to him. She has committed adultery on your son by being a harlot. She's got pregnant from someone outside the family. Judah, you're the authority. What can we do and what should we do?" She's guilty of being a prostitute. And he says, "Bring her out and let's burn her down to the ground." Judah, you idiot. You're going to recommend that she be burned, and you just 3 months ago had sex with a harlot. He's not seeing the hypocrisy in it, is he? You want to burn her. Guess what? You should throw yourself in the fire too, because you're nothing but a hypocrite, Judah. And that's the thing with elites, right? They request that you do it, but they don't do it. So, like Judah Newsom up there in Sacramento says, "You guys can't meet as a church. You got to be 6 feet apart, wear your mask, and keep separate. Don't even meet for Thanksgiving. Oh, but my friends, my elite friends up there can go have a meal together, and we catch you dining together in close quarters during the lockdowns." Oh yeah, do as I say, not as I do. Thank you very much, Gavin Judah, or whatever your name is. But that's what Judah's doing, right? You better do it. I'll penalize you, but I'm not going to penalize myself. Wow, I hope you will learn from this, Judah. Here's the thing about this, the established order and resisting it. First of all, you have to recognize the hypocrisy. I hope everybody in this room realizes when they tell you, well, this is about compassion, this is about tolerance, this is about inclusion, this is about equity, this is about being nice to people, this is about loving your neighbor. Don't believe them. All they're doing is virtue signaling. That's what Judah is doing. He's virtue signaling. Burn her for harlotry. Dude, are you crazy? Yes. Yes. So this is where hypocrisy has to claim social virtue when they have none. So these college kids, they look to gravitate to all these social justice issues because they have no meaning in life. That's the problem. So they virtue signal because they have no virtue. They have nothing that's virtuous to hang on to. They don't, because they've rejected biblical morality and they've rejected biblical values. So what do you got left? Well, I just virtue signal that I'm a good person. Well, the problem is you're not a good person unless you follow God. So you can't say you're a good person unless you want to fake it. So they virtue signal. I'm doing something good. I'm fighting for Palestine. You're an idiot. You're fighting for the wrong people. They don't even know what they're doing, right? How dare you drive your SUV? How dare you eat your big steak today? How dare you drive your V8 engine? Don't you know you should be eating crickets? Don't you know you should be driving an EV vehicle and walking to church and riding your bike to church because you want to save the planet? How dare you, says Greta. Right? Do you know what this whole climate emergency is about? You want to know what the global warming hoax is all about? It's about taking your property. That's what it's about. It's about seizing your property like every Marxist and communist wants. What do you mean, Brandon? I thought this was about clean air and clean water. It's not about that. United Nations Biodiversity Conference came out and said it. We want to do and land grab 30% of global land by 2030, including water and land, okay? You understand this is a land grab. And they want to do it because you and I don't know how to take care of the land, and we're causing pollution by just breathing out of our mouths. And so they need to come in and arrest it, and the government will know what to do with the land and the water. Yeah, okay. So basically by 2030 they want to do it. You understand we're six years away, and then according to what I read, they want to supercharge this and get this rolling. Oh, yeah, and by the way, the Biden-Harris put out the executive order, December 2021, that the United States will confiscate 30% of the land in the United States and water by 2030. So there it is. There's the White House. Oh, yeah, California. We've already done it. Gavin Newsom already implied the 30 by 30. There it is. It's the website of itself, 30 by 30. So they're taking 30% of the water and the land in California and giving it to the state and taking it away from you and I. Even if you own the land, the private property, oh, you better understand this. Doesn't matter if you own it because the Sustains Act was put in place. And the Sustains Act basically says that any natural processes on your private land, including water, including the air we breathe, including photosynthesis, including pollination, or any health benefits that the environment gets from your land, that means you can't do anything on your land. If you have the kit fox on this property, if you have a kangaroo rat on this property, if you have the Bakersfield cactus growing on this property, we will not let you do anything on that property, even though you own it. That's already happening. So when they virtue signal, we got to save the planet, it's all about, we want to steal your property. Oh, what did Klaus say? What did he say? What's the famous phrase? You'll own nothing and be happy. Kiss private property goodbye. By 2030, this will go down. And if the election goes the wrong way, they will pop the clutch on this. Okay? That's what's at stake. When she was brought out, she sent her father-in-law saying, by the man to whom these belong, I am with child. And she said, please determine whose these are, the signet and cord and the staff. It's like what Phil Haney says, I have everything they have ever written, Obama and Hillary, on a flash drive. I have everything they writ right there, and here it is. This is what indicts them. So what do you think they did? When they brought this stuff, they brought some shepherd staff, the signet ring, and the cord, and they brought it to Judah, and he's looking at it. Dude, you can't write a better novel than that. No one could even dream of that. She outfoxed him. Because you know why? Let me tell you a little thing on elites. Have you noticed that those in power are kind of dumb? Have you? They're not all there. And so they're, if you really understand, they got there through power and influence and all this other junk. They're really not the sharpest knives in the drawer. So this little girl outsmarts the kingpin. So Judah, what can he do? He's caught. Acknowledged them and said, she has been more righteous than I because I did not give her to Shelah, my son. Well, good for him. He's finally recognizing this. I wonder if the Talmudic justice is working on him now. And he never knew her again. So he hands off. But guess what happens? She has a baby growing inside of her. And not just one baby, two babies. Okay? And this will continue the line of the Messiah. She has rescued the line of the Messiah. And Judah's made to look like an idiot in all of this. But she's the heroine. This is why she gets put into the line of Messiah in Matthew, along with 4 other Gentile women. Did you know that? Tamar, Rahab. Rahab's a prostitute. She's a Gentile. Who else? Ruth, the Moabite. What's the 4th one? Who's the 4th one? She's a Hittite. She's a Hittite. King David put her husband in the front lines to kill him. Bathsheba. She's a Hittite. All 4 ladies are in Matthew's genealogy. No, notice the thing. All 4 ladies, when you study all 4 ladies, they all took a faith risk to preserve the line of the Messiah in all their stories. All their stories, these 4 women, this is why Matthew puts them in, because they're so heroic in saving the line of the Messiah that he puts these Gentile women in there. Because she preserves it. Ruth preserves it, all of them. The Rahab the prostitute preserves Israel for goodness sake. Right? She lies about them, okay? To protect them, right? So let me give you the principle, and then I gotta finish on a climactic thing. In resisting the established man-made order, there are going to be times in this fallen world where you're going to be forced into a situation where you don't have a lot of good options available to you. That's Tamar. Now, again, Moses is not criticizing her for the deception, for the lying, for the prostitution thing. It's wrong, okay? We acknowledge that. But what Moses is trying to point out is that she kept the higher good in place. She went after the higher good. And the higher good was to preserve the line of the Messiah. Okay? So, let me give you a situation that you can kind of relate to then. Because we all, I think, at some point have to face this in our lives. At some point. So, if you were in Nazi Germany and you were like the tin booms where you were harboring Jews in your house to protect them from the Nazi regime, and then the Nazi soldiers came knocking on your door and asked you, do you have Jews living in your house? What would you say? No. Well, you're lying. Yes, right. I would lie. Why? To preserve the highest good. The highest good is to protect their lives. You wouldn't come off with a mentality of well, I don't want to lie, so yeah, here's 3 of them right there. You would be a bozo if you did that. So the idea is there's a lot of situations that we're going to get into, and there's really not a lot of good options. So when you're in those kinds of situations, default to what is the highest good? What is the highest good? Okay? I'm not recommending doing wrong. I'm just saying there will be situations where that's your only option. And you don't have a lot of good other options. Okay? And by her doing that, she saves the line of the Messiah. Now here's the rest of the story. Okay? Now, I think you'll like this. Now, it came to pass after a time for giving birth that, behold, twins were in her womb. Not just 1, but 2. Huh. And so it was when she was giving birth that one put out his hand. So she's giving birth, and the little guy, his hand comes out. So what they would do during that period of time, they tie a string around that hand, especially with twins. The midwife took a scarlet thread, and bound it on his hand, saying, "This one came out first." Then it happened as he drew his hand back his hand, that his brother came out unexpectedly. And she said, "How did you break through? This breach be upon you." Therefore his name was called Peretz, or he who breaks through. And afterward his brother came out who had the scarlet thread on his hand. His name was called Zerah, or means rising or shining. Okay, what's going on here? It's a last teaching lesson to Judah. Okay? Now, the good news about Judah, this starts turning Judah around, by the way. And by the end, when you get into the last few chapters of Genesis, Judah has his head screwed on straight, finally. And now he can be the leader of Israel, which is going to produce the king line and produce the Messiah. So we've been working on Judah, and he's coming along, thank God. Okay, but what does this last message to Judah teach him? Well, this is interesting. It's Talonic justice. And that's been the Hebrew mindset all through this. Okay. Twins. Does that remind you of something that happened prior to this? Who had twins inside them? Rebekah. Okay, and they were wrestling inside. Jacob and Esau, remember? Wrestling, two twins. Okay? And then before they're born, God tells Rebekah and Yitzhak, the older will serve the younger. So basically the younger, I'm going to go against all social norms, and I'm choosing the younger to rule Israel and to pass the Abrahamic covenant through. It's the younger will do it, not the older. And we know why. We know that Esau was a man that had no regards for God, and that Jacob always had regards for God. Now, Jacob wasn't perfect, okay? He wasn't perfect, but he at least had regard for God and wanted to carry the responsibility on his shoulders. We talked about that. Okay, so there's a picture. God goes against the social norms of the day, because typically it's the firstborn that has the inheritance rights and the blessings, right? But God says, no, it won't be the firstborn, it's the secondborn, because that guy doesn't have the character that I want. I'm looking for character. Okay, move on. Jacob has all these kids, okay? Reuben, the eldest, who should be by birthright the leader of the clan, forfeits it because he slept with dad's concubine. So he forfeits. The next in line is Judah. Judah can't do it at this time, at least. And so it's like these dudes can't rule anything. And the rest of them sold Joseph into slavery because God said, you know what? You guys can't get your heads screwed on straight. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go to this guy called Joseph. At that time, Benjamin's not born, so guess who's the youngest? Joseph. And he's saying, I'm going to give him a dream, and I'm going to confirm that through the younger is going to rule all of you. And remember, they got mad, and Judah's responsible for selling him off. Younger will rule the older. Why did God pick Joseph? Because Joseph's character. That's why. Why didn't he pick Judah? Because Judah doesn't have the character at this point to rule. There's no way he's going to do that. Now let's go to Judah's babies. The older sticks out his hand. They tie a red cord around it, but then it pops in. The second-born pops out. What does that mean? It means that the second-born is now the firstborn. And that guy, Peretz, will be the head of the clan. And Peretz will be through him where the line of the Messiah comes through. Look at this chart. You see where Judah, and then it does a right angle right here, and then guess who the next one in line is? Peretz. So what God is saying is, I choose Peretz for the line of the Messiah to go through. And as you can see, the line continues on through Jesse to David, and then it splits off through Solomon. The line of Jeconiah is cursed, and so anyone from Jeconiah on cannot rule. That's why Messiah is virgin born. He doesn't. Joseph was not his genealogical father. But then the line through Nathan, as you can see, goes all the way to Mary, and therefore that's the line where Jesus comes from, is Nathan's line. And therefore it gives him the right to rule over Israel because of that line. But Peretz is the guy who the line's going to go through. Okay? Now, what about this scarlet thread? What's all that about? It's a typology. It's a typology, and it's God sending a symbol. The scarlet thread is all through the scriptures. Did you know that? Scarlet is the color of blood. Okay? And blood represents two things. It represents atonement, sacrifice, and it also represents the destroying of enemies. Okay? It's twofold, okay? Sacrifice, destroying of enemies. And this red line will go through the entire scripture. And guess how that red line is seen? It's seen in certain typologies. So in the high priest's garment, guess what? The red thread shows up. They shall take gold and blue and purple and a scarlet thread. It's mentioned 3 times in the high priest's vestments. Right? Red scarlet, red line. In the tabernacle, the curtains and the veil itself is not only made up of linen, but its colors are blue, purple, and scarlet. That's what the curtains would have looked like in Moses' tabernacle, and the veil even in the temple were of those colors, the scarlet thread. Oh, by the way, just interesting enough that on the Yom Kippur, when the 2 goats were assembled, and they sacrificed the one, and they let the other one go out to Azazel, once the goat had made it all the way out and was basically thrown off a cliff, and he had the sins of Israel taken with him, there was a tradition that at the temple there was a scarlet thread that hung from the temple door, and when the Azazel goat died and took the sins of Israel out, the scarlet thread turned white. And it was at 30 A.D. that the scarlet thread stopped turning white. Then the scarlet thread appears at the house of Rahab, the other Gentile who saves Israel and saves the line of the Messiah. And what do they tell her? Put a scarlet cord outside your window and we won't attack you, we'll preserve you, we'll keep you safe. The scarlet thread protects her. The scarlet thread is the veil. Who's the veil? What does the Messiah, what does Scripture say the veil is? Jesus. The scarlet cord that protects Rahab is Jesus. Oh, so why is the scarlet thread appearing with the birth of these 2 babies? Because what God is trying to say is, what was at stake was the line of the Messiah who represents the scarlet thread. And I am showing you, when that baby sticks his hand on, they put that scarlet, I am at work. They will not stop my son from coming. And even though these knuckleheads were screwing everything up, I still got my will accomplished. So through Tamar, Perez, which is an offspring of Judah, will continue the line. No one will stop the line. And that scarlet thread will come to where that scarlet thread is found in Jesus. Then the soldiers of the governor took Jesus into the praetorium and gathered the whole garrison around him. And they stripped him and put what color? A scarlet robe. Representing royalty. Scarlet's all over the place, by the way. But it doesn't stop at the cross. It goes all the way to the second coming. So the scarlet thread is a reference to Jesus. It's a reference to his sacrifice, but it's also a reference to his judgment as well. How so? Then I opened heaven, and behold, a white horse, and he who sat on was called Faithful and True. And in righteousness he judges and makes wars, and was clothed with a robe dipped in blood, or the color of scarlet, because now he is coming back to judge. The scarlet thread is the line of the Messiah, and the line of the Messiah is promising to be king of the world. But what do we have to do as far as understanding totalitarian regimes? It's the concept that Jesus will destroy man-made totalitarian regimes, that of the Antichrist, and then usher in his own kingdom. That's the ultimate goal. And so the line of that Messiah has been going all through Scripture to the very, very end. And if you can understand that, despite the totalitarian regime you're getting ready to live in, then you will understand how to live in that regime, because ultimately Christ overthrows it. And you can have hope and you can have trust in Him that no matter what knuckleheads try to do to control you, and whatever they try to come against you with, God will have His say at the end. And God will make the way for all of us. Let's pray. Father, thank you, Lord, for what we can learn from Tamar and Judah and that whole situation and the beautiful picture of Jesus through the scarlet thread. We thank you for that, knowing that you're in full control. Nothing's happening that's not out of it. We thank you for that. It brings us reassurance and trust. I pray, Father, if there's anyone here that doesn't know your Son, they would come to faith in the Messiah, realizing the scarlet blood that was shed for them on the cross was for their forgiveness, and that He died and was buried and rose on the third day to give everlasting life to anyone who would believe in Him. We pray now in Jesus' name, amen.